controversy over, not me, but the Leviticus of the Seventh-day Adventists. Today we're going to address the question, why are Davidians so confused over this? The first 11 pages covering the Constitution bylaws have been debated and argued for decades. That's our topic today. So please join us. This is a production of upa7.org, and we're going to get into the details. We'll begin with this text for meditation. Actually, the first paragraph published in this tract, the organizational tract, the Leviticus of the Seventh-day Adventists, page 2, and it reads, provisional in its setup as well as its name, the Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Association exists solely to accomplish a divinely appointed work within the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, wherein it therefore strictly confines its activities. As its work therein draws to a close, and the servants of our God are sealed, its name will be changed, and its purpose and work will become all-embracing to the gospel. Then its constitution and bylaws, as herein codified, will become fully operative. That last sentence is really key. We're going to address that question later on, but when will the Leviticus become fully operative? It seems a lot of people don't even understand English because the answer's right here. So this is the basis of we're going to look into more detail. So why is there so much confusion? Who's right and who's wrong? Let's look at some attempts to try to implement the Leviticus, because a lot of people will say, oh, we got to follow the Leviticus. Okay, so how are you doing it? Well, here are the examples we have from the past and the present. The associations under Salem, Mountaindale, and Waco all follow the Florence Houteff model, having no president and electing an executive council by popular vote. They have a vice president to do the work of a president. So a lot of people see that and they go, this doesn't make any sense. How can you have a association with no president? But they bought the lie of Florence Houteff. Now, we've documented this, and it's in prior videos. You can check a link in the description box below about how Florence Houteff usurped and took over the association. And it's strange how Salem, Mountaindale, and Waco all follow this pattern, but that's well established. In contrast, you have Bashan and the 11th Hour Church under Lennox Sam, who have their self-appointed presidents who appoint their executive councils. Now, at least they're closer to the Leviticus because Brother Houteff was president and he appointed his council. But this begs the question, who appointed their presidents? And, of course, they appointed themselves. In the case of Bashan, it was M.J. Bingham. In the case of 11th Hour Church, Lennox Sam. And now we have more recently the pre-11th Hour Ministry appoints their own, quote, board of directors, and it tries to avoid looking like Mountaindale, where they came from, and their executive council. But in reality, it's like, who appointed their board of directors? They just appeared out of nowhere. And so once again, we got this question, well, who's really following Leviticus? And the answer is none of them. So how are we going to unpack this thing and understand how the Leviticus applies today? Well, in the case of Salem, Mountaindale, and Waco, they really want to follow a modern-day Saul. And this is the key quote, tract number 8, page 48, paragraph 2, that totally exposes them. And let's read it here. It says, time has already demonstrated that the Seventh-day Adventist organization is fulfilling the type. Preferring to incorporate and to elect officers by the people's vote, they have therefore manifested that they have cared not so much to please God by being a peculiar people, as he would have them to be, as they have to please themselves, by being as much as possible like the other denomination, just as in Saul's time the people wanted to be like the nations around about them. And although chosen by the people, yet the General Conference officers were nevertheless accepted by God to be the rulers over his people now, as Saul was anciently. Just as he betrayed his trust, however, by disobeying the word of God as spoken to him by the prophet Samuel, So the present church organization, the ancient men before the house, have, says the prophet to the church today, betrayed their trust. Testimonies, Volume 5, page 211. For a more ample treatment of the subject of organization, see our organizational manual. Now, most of you that read the Rod understand that the Davidian organizational manual is the Leviticus. So all you have to do to analyze this, of course, the Seventh-day Adventist organization follows the example of Saul. Just replace this with a GADSDA. The GADSDA, after the death of Brother Hadaf, are just like the mother church. They prefer to incorporate, i.e., in the United States, IRS 501c3. And we have a whole video on that, why that's totally apostasy against God. And then they elect their officers not by the Leviticus, but by the popular vote of the people. It's a political process. They vote, nominate their friends or whatever. Anybody that's been to a session at Mount Dale or Waco have plainly observed this. I've seen it with my own eyes. You don't even half know these people. So they're wanting to be like the world or like the mother church. And that's a fact. So this plainly exposes this political shenanigans that take place during these sessions at Mount Dale and Waco. Isn't that interesting? So take your pick. Who's going to be your modern day Saul? Well, you've got a host of them that have risen over the years. We'll kind of go from left to right here. Over on the far left there, of course, we have one of the first usurpers, Florence Houteff, who had herself installed as vice president. Next to her was Brother Houteff's right-hand man, M.J. Bingham, who appointed himself president and started at Bashan Hill. Next, we got two leaders from Waco. The one looking at us, that's Norman Archer. He's the one that ringleader of that split from Mount Dale in 1991. And even though he's not vice president all the time, he really runs the show behind the scenes with the revolving door of lieutenants that serve as their VPs. Next, we've got Donna Dare, who usurped and took over Salem in 1974 and has been vice president all the way up until about the year 2021, 22. He's really lost his capability, and so now they're bringing in a replacement from Zambia, of all places, Obi Chalala, who's going to become their new vice president. How did they get him? I don't know. Then you have Terry Harrison, who's the publishing, the leader at Pre-11th Hour, the director, I guess they call himself. You have under him Wanda Bloom, who her rebellion broke away from Yucaipa in 1983. She's passed away recently. Going down to the bottom, you got Errol Stanford, kind of the kingpin behind Mount Dale. The next picture, you see a picture of Mount Dale's executive council. This is a couple dated. This is a few years ago because Terry Harrison there is no longer with them. But like I say, all these people are voted in by popular vote. They're nominated and voted, following the example of Saul. And then finally, down there on the lower right, we have the self-appointed and a typical King David, Elijah, Lennox Sam in the pre-11th hour. So you have all of these counterfeits. They all claim to follow Leviticus, but in reality, none of them are. So here's some key questions to consider. Let's sit back and analyze this. Rather than get deeply involved and emotionally connected to defending your apostate association, why don't you just step back and think about it? How do you form an executive council without a president? It's a big issue. If you look at the example under Brother Houteff, he was the porter, president, and prophet. And his authority as president, he chose his executive council. Just like in a leader of the United States, the president chooses his cabinet around him. So that's an absolute fact. So if you don't have a president, how do you get an executive council? Kind of a paradox, isn't it? Where is the authority to continue a GADSDA, that is General Association Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, after the death of Brother Houteff? Friends, it doesn't exist. Okay, so all the authority to continue on with these associations is man-appointed, man-authorized. We don't have instructions from the rod. We don't have a will from Brother Haddoff to continue on the association after he died. Because Brother Haddoff died, it was a surprise to a lot of Davidians, and they created a crisis. So at that point, why didn't Brother E.T. Wilson become president after the death of Brother Haddoff? Now, it was a fact that the Executive Council under Brother Haddoff, Brother E.T. Wilson was the vice president, chosen by Brother Haddoff. Why didn't he take over and become president? You can ponder that one, but he didn't. He was away, he was sick, and Florence maneuvered in quickly the next day and installed herself as vice president and destroyed the office of president, and the rest is history. So the facts are there. E.T. Wilson did not become president because God did not authorize for another association to continue on after the death of Brother Haddoff. That's the facts. And that brings us to the point, is there a need to have an executive council to run a publishing house today? And the answer is no, there isn't. How do we know? Because we're doing it. We'll explain more here in a moment. And then finally, when will the Leviticus and its constitution and bylaws become fully operative again? Well, hint, hint, it was in the prayer thought. The very first paragraph of Leviticus gives the answer. It will be, of course, after Ezekiel 9, after purification. So why are we so desperately trying to operate the Leviticus Constitution and bylaws when there's no authority to do so? It will become operative in the near future. And this is the problem. People haven't thought about this. They're operating on their own assumptions and presumptions rather than it is written. Here's some startling facts to consider. I mean, these are facts that you have to reconcile because people say, oh, it's impossible to operate without following Leviticus. I said, really? Well, consider these facts. For 13 years, from 1930 to 1943, the original Shepherd's Rod message advanced without the Leviticus. You ever thought about that? Furthermore, the Leviticus was published to address the conscription crisis facing young Davidian men during World War II. Because the Mother Church would not support the non-combatant status of Davidian men, Brother Haddoff was forced to form the GADSTA, and the Leviticus was published, the organizational manual with the Constitution and bylaws and the Executive Council, so that they could present the case to the government and support Davidians as non-combatants. We're not facing this crisis today. So that's the fact. The original GADSTA and its Constitution and bylaws was established by the then Prophet Porter President Victor T. Haddoff, who was appointed by God. We all recognize that. And when he died, it ended. It's that simple. So there are no inspired instructions or a will to continue with a GADSTA following the death of Brother Haddoff. It simply didn't happen. So why are we so busy trying to follow Florence Haddoff to resurrect something that has no authority to exist at the current time? So we'll explore that question. Well, how do we operate in this period from the death of Brother Haddoff up until purification? And we've addressed that in great detail in prior videos. One of them is called The Scattering Time, and the other one's The Hands of Zerubbabel, Elijah's Helper. You can check a link in the description box below. So we've thoroughly examined how we can operate today without an executive council, without a porter, without a prophet, and without a president. So that begs the question, how can we operate today without a president or an executive council? Simple. Establish original Shepherd's Rod publishing houses around the world to reach Laodicea. This is the greatest need. It's clearly there in 7 Testimony, page 140. And you can start this with even one individual. We have examples of it. This is not hypothetical or theoretical. We're actually doing it. We've done it here. We've done it in many countries. We've recently established publishing work in the United Kingdom and Australia. And in some cases, a single individual starting out. They're not waiting for permission from some man-appointed executive council. They claim the promises of God. They follow the instructions that are already in the Golden Bowl. So as a local group grows and individuals step up to labor on behalf of the message as self-sacrificing Bible workers, not man-appointed or self-appointed council members, but a publishing committee can be established with as few as 3 individuals. They could plan and organize, begin to gather tithes and offerings, and set up the publishing work. That's how the rod started. It didn't start with executive council. It started with UPA, the publishing work, Universal Publishing. And we can do the same. And eventually, as the work grows, there is one area, in particular the islands of Vanuatu, there's almost 300 Davidians there. So they have a committee of 7 leaders that will arise to meet the expanding needs of the group, which include all the things we have by example: training schools for Bible workers, meeting centers, agricultural enterprises, schools for children. They're doing all of it in Vanuatu. Where'd they get the authority? From the Shepherd's Rod message. They don't ask permission. God has already given us the authority to march forward. We don't need a president or a prophet to tell us what to do. The marching orders are already there. Why aren't you following them? God has people that are. There are Davidians that are not confused. They see the need to get the message out as the leaves of autumn, to equip everybody with a complete set of their own literature so they can read and study for themselves, and then be trained as workers to go out and plead with Mother. It's really simple. It's so simple, and that's its power. That's secret to success. So let's not be blind leaders following the blind. Look at this statement, Shepherd's Rod, Volume 2, page 124, paragraph 1. It reads, "There are so many so-called Christians who, like Cain, say, it makes no difference. One thing is good as another. But God accepts no substitute in no man's religion. That which human wisdom has devised is man's righteousness, and not the righteousness of Christ. Therefore, it is an abomination in God's sight. The human fiber of obedience to divine requirements being weakened, and the sinful inclinations strengthened from generation to generation, the nature of man cannot be better at this present time than when the disciples asked Jesus, 'Knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard the saying?' So-called Christians, like the Pharisees, become offended when told of their errors and rebuked for their sins. But he answered and said, 'Every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be rooted up. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch.'" Friends, let's apply it to the situation today. If you go to the modern-day Pharisees amongst Davidians and point out their errors and their sins, they get offended. And they turn around and rend you asunder and attack you and attack your character. When they're the ones that aren't following the Shepherd's Rod, they're not following the Leviticus. They're so-called Christians, and we foolishly follow them. But no more. God has honest people that wake up and arouse to the needs of the situation, will move forward, and they don't ask permission of no man to do the work that God's put on the hearts of individuals to plead with Mother. So God says, Jesus, like the leaders of old, if they blind be the leaders of the blind, leave them alone. They're going to fall in the ditch. So break free from these man-corrupted associations and follow God. Don't follow them blindfolded into perdition. So what can we learn in our summary of this study? The original Leviticus was established in 1943 as a response to the conscription status of young Davidian men. The Constitution and bylaws remained operative until the death of Brother Hadaf. So under his control, him as president, there was nobody else. He appointed his executive council, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and so forth. So that was fully authorized and legal until his death. Since there are no clear inspired instructions to continue the GADSDA and its bylaws today, then we are to function as the hands of Zerubbabel, Elijah's helpers, to continue to publish the original Shepherd's Rod message around the world and spread it as the leaves of autumn. No executive council or bylaws are needed. People will argue and squeal, "Oh, you can't do that." And I'm like, says who? It's already being done. You can't deny it. So if you want to know more about how the hands of Zerubbabel, Elijah's helpers, that's our role, fits into the work, check the link in the description box below. We have a video on that. And we've set the example. We can help you do the same. So you don't need to wait for some man-authorized executive council to tell you what to do. Or, as some of the other Davidians are waiting for some new Elijah prophet to pop up and tell them what to do. And I said, no, you're under a strong delusion. The marching orders are there. Why don't you follow them? Why don't you support the work to set up publishing houses to reach the 22+ million Adventists around the world? That's what's needed. We should have a publishing house in every country where there's Seventh-day Adventists. We've got, how many? 7 of them now, and we're working on more. This is God's work. No man can stop it. And the key is the Leviticus will become fully operational once again in the kingdom after the separation wheat and tares. It's clear from right in the first paragraph. Okay? It's strange how people can read English and not understand it. All attempts to resurrect the Executive Council and implement its bylaws since the death of Brother Houteff have resulted in amazing confusion and a host of uninspired man-made doctrines. And we have proven this thoroughly. We got 2 videos examining the bylaws of Mountaindale and Waco, comparing them to the original Leviticus, and you'll be shocked. It's full of unauthorized, man-inspired ideas and doctrines. Anybody who's been to a session and seen a discussion over the bylaws will know what I'm talking about. Nothing but politics. God's not in that mess. So we can operate today in a simple way by setting up publishing houses in your local area, publishing the original law, and as you grow and expand, you can train up Bible workers. We can help you with all of that. You can set up wherever the need is rise. If you want to do agriculture enterprises, then do them. What's holding you back? They're doing it in South Africa. You can do it in your own home. If you want to set up a school for children, if you got a lot of young people that need to be instructed or homeschooled, then do it. What are you waiting for? Put your foot in the River Jordan. So this concludes our presentation. If you have any further questions, comments on this subject, then please subscribe to this YouTube channel, Universal Publishing Association, for future updates. Or to request assistance how to set up an original Shepherd's Rod publish house in your area. This is what we do. We're well equipped to do that. We're doing it continually all the time. Then please feel free to contact us anytime. Here's our email, our phone number. You can call, text, or connect with us on WhatsApp using this number, or visit one of our websites, yparish.org, where we have reports and more details on all of this. So we appreciate your time. May God richly bless your search for truth as for hidden treasure, and to cease ye from man, whose breath is in his nostrils. Godspeed.